It's the Dev Friday Show with Mark and Tim.
And today, I would say today, we are so woefully unprepared. I still have yet to release last week's podcast.
Oh my gosh,
But
we
it's
talked
Friday,
about
though.
the release
It's
schedule.
Friday,
It's true,
and
that's
it will
true.
get done on Friday.
You still have
it
it
should
the
be
rest
done
of the day.
Friday
That's
morning,
true.
but it's been a busy week.
I know. Has been.
And then what else? Oh, I didn't even change the titles. So if they're watching the stream, they're going to think it's episode 13, and it's actually episode 14. So I'll have to change that later.
So woefully behind today.
I know. I've had nothing but meetings today.
Oh, really? Kind of stacked. Yeah. How was your? Well, let's start with this. How was your cookout?
How was the cooking? Yeah.
Cookout.
It went. I mean, honestly, we were all feeling under the weather.
Oh, really?
And the snow on Sunday night delayed the campers. So what was supposed to be a snack at 10 o'clock became a snack at 1 in the morning. So the first night I was up till 2:30 and then got up the next morning to make breakfast. So it was, I mean, the food was good. Everybody seemed to like the food. It was just maybe a little harder effort than I was thinking, maybe due to the like I say,
circumstances and everything going on.
Yeah, it seems like we've got like some type of cold or thing that we just can't seem to kick since the beginning of the year. I was thinking, all right, we'll get it, and that's great. We'll be over it. So when things start happening mid-January, we'll be fine because we'll have already gotten whatever it is. But it just seems to hang on. So we'll see.
Got to start pumping the vitamin D and zinc there.
Yeah, well, no, I did see vitamin D and zinc. It's actually what I've got in a thing that I forget to take often. But yeah.
So yeah, and also with my start of the week, or the start of the semester this week.
You're teaching young impressionable minds now, huh?
Yeah, it was interesting. I was thinking about this yesterday. We're like, finishing up the week because I teach primarily between like Monday and through Thursday. That's why Friday, Tim, I spend with you. So we have quality time on Friday, only you and me. But during the week, I have my first classes, doing my initial lecture videos, and to see the students. And it's interesting. The first week to 2 weeks is that kind of the for the students. I know it's the happy time of the semester where they come to class with wide eyes and open hearts and ready to learn. Yeah. And then as the semester rolls on, that starts to fade a little bit as the work starts to get harder or just increase. And I know for my students too in my program, the springtime is always a challenging time because they have a lot of classes that they, especially for those that want to complete the program this semester. Usually they're taking like 5 courses and there's a lot of projects on those courses. So yeah. But usually the course I teach in the springtime I actually like. So it's just it's a balancing act for everyone.
How have they liked the new? How have they liked? I think my mom has arrived.
Yeah, I'm still.
The dog is barking. How do they like the background behind you now?
I'm still working on that because when I was doing my initial lecture videos on Monday and Tuesday, I was like trying to figure out a setup. That's why I was changing up my OBS setup to kind of figure out what would be the best use. I did change up a little bit. I went to more of a sitting approach. Like, I have my standing desk. I'm standing now with it, but I lowered my green screen down to make it a little more manageable. But I went back to the green screen just because it's easier. Just because it's easier, switching back and forth, overlaying or top of the software. I was like, I don't want to deal with like I liked your idea about doing a circle, but I didn't get that set up. So I may still try to implement that if I can figure out how to do that in OBS. But yeah, I just went back to the green screen. Also, like I said, I have these good lights around me. So I was like, well, why don't I use them for the green screen? Because that's what I got them for. So, all right. So we'll see.
For us, we get to see the collection of action figures behind you in the IKEA cases that cannot be ordered online.
That's true. They're probably sold out right now. So I was able to get the last few that are available in Philadelphia. No, actually, they came back in stock pretty good. I don't know. I haven't even checked because, I'm done. The ones you see behind me, because they're really nice and I like them, but they're a pain to put together. And then also well, it doesn't take too long. Once you do one, you figure it out. It's not too bad. But I have lights set up in here. I did custom feet. I bought a feet, like these nice metal feet, like these 4 or 5 inch feet that are made for, like IKEA makes for their kitchen cabinets. I bought them because I saw this hack online on discussion board of somebody else who did it, and to raise it up a little bit and also to get it off the ground. And so they look really nice. But so that's what I was doing last week about customizing them and getting them up. But yeah, I'm done. They're kind of like, I like kind of having a few behind me, and then for a background for me to look at, turn around in my office when I'm kind of bored, and kind of to admire. But yeah, I'm done. The detolfs are done.
You're saying the some assembly required.
Yeah, some assembly. Yeah, that's right.
Might be a turnoff at some point in time. All right. Well, I'm actually half listening to you, half trying to do the show notes from last week. I'm looking at the transcript and remembering what we talked about.
But you don't have to produce last week's show during the current show.
This is the time I have. I'm telling you, my calendar today is booked.
You're locked up. So as soon as we get done with this, are you going to a meeting at 2:00?
Not at 2:00. I think I'm at 2:30. I at least scheduled it that, and I didn't realize I had a meeting that came up to 12:45. So I just got off of that and got into here. But it's just, today's been a busy day. I didn't catch up with me being on the first 2 days of the week, so that always takes a little time to get back up to speed.
And also this week, Tim, remember how last week was the Friday of Linux? And I guess because the current show title that we have on Twitter now, it could still be the Friday of Linux.
Yeah.
I was still continuing my journey with that this week. Because
really?
You know how
Are you still on Pop OS?
I'm still Pop OS, absolutely.
Yeah, you can't leave Pop OS. It's the
best.
But
remember how I said I was afraid to get it running on my primary desktop PC because I didn't want to mess up my configuration, and I was worried about that. So that's why I have it running on my Surface Go laptop, because that's a nice kind of easy thing. But one thing, as I was using, I still got into using Doom Emacs. I know you love talking about Emacs and Vim.
Oh, no, the best conversations ever. I feel like people that were programming 10, 20 years ago are really engaged by those conversations. So we should play more to that.
It's like a topic that for a live podcast when it comes up, it's like usually there's one person like me who likes Vim or Emacs and likes to talk about it.
And now you like both.
I like both.
Now you like both.
My head's like exploding. But then you have the co-hosts that are on the show being like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we keep talking about this again. Because I was listening to, it's funny, I was listening to the PHP Ugly podcast last night. Because as I'm starting to
go, this is going to go no place good.
No, it's fine. It's fine. No, because it's interesting. When I'm starting to think, ending the week on a Thursday, I'm starting to think about the show and, wrap up some of the stuff. I'm usually at my computer and checking Twitter. And that always pops in my feed because I guess they record their show late Thursday night. And so I see the live stream.
Right.
So
basically, when it's just like a little bit too late for me to actually log on and listen to it, that's when they start.
It's just, I know they start like crazy late.
It's like 11:30 or something like that.
Yeah, they go for a couple hours or something like that. I don't know. It is crazy.
Yeah. No, the whole thing's ugly.
So I usually just check out a little bit of it, but I kept I kept it on the background while I was working on stuff last night because I thought it was kind of interesting. But the same thing happened to them. I guess Eric? Do you know Eric Johnson?
Yeah, I know Eric Johnson.
He started talking about Vim because he was talking about using Vim with I think it was PHP Storm and some issues.
The Vim bindings, John uses the Vim bindings for that as well. John is the podcast that I work with on a day-to-day basis.
So he was having an issue with that, and I guess so John Coughlin, I think I don't know his last name.
You're close enough.
He was letting him go and let him talk, and he was kind of confirming, helping out. But the other guy,
we need to pause here and just note that John is the least ugly of the uglies.
That's true. I believe
that's we need to say that.
He's pretty. Yeah. But then the other guy, which I can't remember his name right now, he totally checked out. He was like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe we're talking about Vim. Why are we doing this again? So it was so funny because it made me think about conversations we've been having. So anyway, getting back to why I continue my journey with Linux this week. One of the issues I had with running Doom Emacs, even though I like the interface, I like kind of the combination of Emacs with its Vim emulation mode, and then kind of learning Emacs, within this framework of Doom Emacs. I kind of like it, but on the PC, I mentioned it just feels slow. It actually in some ways feels slower than the IDE when I'm moving around, and when I'm using a text editor, especially for programming. I hate when I press a key down for let's say that's binded to some type of function
before you actually
lags. I know, it just 1 or 2 seconds. That drives me crazy, especially when I'm trying to learn the software, because the one way to learn Emacs is you use your space bar or your control C key to kind of, get the key binding started. And Emacs has this nice feature where it'll pop up like a list of key bindings at the bottom of the screen to show you
so you
what
can
certain
see
functions.
to help you
Yeah,
figure
so
out what
it's
you're
sort
gonna
of
use.
like
All
a
right,
nice
yeah,
kind of auto-complete built into it, so I can kind of learn what the functions are and the what I need to kind of to trigger. But the thing is, when I do that, it's so slow in the PC, and I'm like, or on Windows. So it was really starting to frustrate me, especially when I use it on my Surface Go laptop, which is so underpowered compared to my desktop PC. But now they have Pop! OS running on it, super fast, and Doom Emacs runs
No,
really,
you were
really
saying,
well on
because
it.
you were saying last week, Pop! OS running on the Surface seemed faster to you than Mint OS or
Absolutely, yeah,
Linux, whatever it is.
and faster than Windows. Yeah, it's
faster
amazing.
than Windows. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Because both were faster than trying to run Emacs on Windows.
Yeah.
But now you're running it on your desktop. You dual booting?
Well, okay, so this is what I thought about.
Okay.
So I have this crazy beefed out machine. I have 64 gigabytes of memory on my desktop computer. I have like a 12 core processor. Why don't I try to do a VM and see if I could run that side by side with other applications, running Pop! OS and run primarily to use Doom Emacs with it and see how well it works. So I dedicated 16 gigabytes of memory to
I
it.
think you may be putting the most effort into using Emacs of anyone I've ever heard that has used Emacs.
I know. I mean, it's great. It's super fun. So I tried the with the Hyper-V manager that Windows has. That's kind of built in. If you have that feature available to you on the version of Windows, I tried that. I was able to get. Actually, I wasn't able to get. I wasn't able to get installed. But it was a little bit just the going back and forth between Windows, and just had some issues with it. So I looked up what the VMware workstation player, which I haven't used in so long.
Yeah.
And I got that installed. It's free for personal use. So I downloaded that, got that running Pop! OS. Because I remember now after doing it, they have their own custom VMware tools that you install as like a Linux package. After you get the OS running, it provides nice integration between the host OS and the virtual machine. So it's working perfectly now. The cursor's going back and forth. Basically, I have Doom Emacs running on Linux in a VM side by side with my other applications.
That's like windowed in your Windows environment.
Yeah, and it's nice too with the with the because I like to use the tiling feature of Windows and move my windows back and forth, have them automatically tiled, and with that was the issue I had with the Hyper-V, the graphics, where it wouldn't. I was kind of fixed on I could only do 1980 by I had fixed sizes I could only kind of set them to, and I like to do a custom layout so I could tile the window with my other windows. And VMware gives you that. So with the VMware tools, you could do basically custom resolutions, and then it'll just adapt the OS, the Linux OS, to whatever size of resolution that you need.
Nice. So
works nice.
The OS is running in a window that you're resizing on your host machine, and it kind of behaves that way like another.
So I'm starting with just primarily using it for running my Emacs with Vim, and because also we didn't get to talk about the org. You know about the org, Tim? The org mode on Emacs?
Literally nothing about Emacs do I know.
The org mode and org agenda. This is another reason why, another rat hole I went to, because I mentioned to you after we finished up the podcast last week. I was, one of the reasons I also wanted to do Emacs, I saw a YouTube video on this org mode, which is basically like a task manager built into Emacs that basically gives you sort of like if you think like Markdown, sort of like a hyper Markdown way of managing a task list, but then having automated features to manage like your project's task list within Emacs. Also with Org Agenda, you could schedule tasks with a nice kind of calendar feature that it kind of pops up with. So I could schedule certain or a list of tasks or specific tasks to be done on a certain date. And then it has this agenda mode. I could just see everything in one view. So it's super, super cool because think about when you work in projects. I was going to ask you about this. How do you manage, because you primarily use, is PHP Storm? I keep always forgetting the IDE.
How do you forget the IDE that I talk about all the time?
I only think about Vim and Emacs, Tim.
In the world. I mean, it's PHP Storm, but it's JetBrains, which makes a host of IDEs that everybody knows about, yet you forget every time. You're like, what was it that you used? Was it that PHP Storm thing? Yes, it's the PHP Storm thing. which
that's
has
what
a Vim mode.
So what's your preference, or how do you, from a day-to-day for your either your personal kind of tasks you need to accomplish within your job or projects you're working on, like, do you prefer you just use paper, paper and pencil? Is that what you do?
I mean, that works, right? It's got a display that's almost always there. It's easy to move to a new page. There is no constraints as to how tasks or whatever you're trying to organize need to be put on that paper.
Do you have like a special system you use, like the bullet system, that you have like little diagrams?
I mean, wouldn't that be cool? Wouldn't that be cool if I was so productive that I had a system to talk about my productivity? No, honestly, I mean, I use paper and pencil for some stuff. I actually was playing with OneNote if we were talking about doing the cooking at camp.
Okay, yeah.
We put everything in OneNote, all the recipes, the schedule.
That works good.
And I found that actually pretty useful. Honestly, for the ingredient list, that was the spreadsheet, because it's putting the ingredients, figure out how much of one thing you're gonna have to make or how much per person, multiply it out, do a pivot table. Hey, where's the Excel people? Now they're gonna be like, pivot table. He's talking my language. Do a pivot table.
Oh, that's right. I never thought about that. You could do Excel or tables directly within OneNote. So if you could do like
I didn't actually do that. I didn't do that. I just used Google Sheets for that because I'm far more familiar with that. But I'm sure I could have. But then I dropped a pivot table to reduce all of the different ingredients, because we had multiple ingredients. You know, like you need milk for this, you need milk for this too. So since I kept the same unit from all, the pivot table could just reduce it to one ingredient, how much I needed to buy. So when I went to the store, it was easier to figure all that out. And that worked out pretty well. But no, OneNote we used for each meal. We would have kind of this, we need to make this, we need to make this, we need to make this. These are the things that are going to go on the serving, surface. And here's the recipes that we might need if we're actually making something. And then for each day, I had a series of just like to-do lists. Like, this is the prep that we need to do before breakfast. This is breakfast. This is prep before lunch. This is lunch. And we could just, and honestly, after I put them all in OneNote, I did this amazing thing. I don't know if you know this, but OneNote has this really cool feature where you can print it.
Whoa. I was going to go, were you able to sync it? And you go, no, I was able to print it.
I was able to print it. So I printed them all out. So in the morning, I could just slap down Monday morning's checklist and be like, check, 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 check. And then when someone was like, how do we make this? You pull out Monday's lunch recipe and say, this is how you make guacamole, folks. You take avocados and an immersion blender and you blend it a lot. Something like that.
See, I love how you went to immediately, you just go practice print it. I was thinking in my mind as you were talking, I was like, oh, I know OneNote has a nice feature with if you use your Microsoft account, it could sync it with your Office 365 or whatever that is, and then you could have it on your device. So on Android, they have like a OneNote
I have OneNote on the phone.
And so we're able to sync it between the computer and the phone and everything like that, or other people you could share it with.
Yeah, I was able. I don't know if I ever actually did share it with my wife, because she installed the app. I don't know if I figured out how to share it because I couldn't share it from the mobile, but I did have it synced, so I was checking it on my phone at some times when we needed to reference things.
Well, there you go. That's what I was thinking you would do. Yeah.
But for the actual process when we're doing this stuff, no, I didn't even have the computer in the kitchen. I talked about that last week, that we were thinking of putting the Surface there for that reason, but no, it was just paper, and it worked great. The one thing I did find on syncing OneNote, as I was trying to figure out how to share it, I hit a button, and it looked like it might be a button that would share something, but it deleted the notebook. So that was fun. It's like all of it gone on my phone. But it just deleted it from the phone. And then I could go add notebook, and it's like, oh, here's the notebooks that are in your Microsoft account. Which ones do you want to sync with the phone again? I'm like, the one that I just deleted, because I had no idea what that single button did. There was no confirmation of, and it just disappeared it. So there was a moment of like, what just happened there? Because I did this like the day before, after we had put everything in it, had all the lists. But yes, back to your question, what do I use to organize? I've used OneNote for stuff like that. Honestly, for day-to-day project work, there's project management software that we use. That there's software that product likes to use. On the dev team, we like to use GitHub.
So I just was wondering, do you have anything kind of built into your IDE that you kind of a workflow user, you not kind of got away from that, you don't use as much?
No, so because when we're talking about code, the process is generally someone else writes code, you need to peer review it or something like that. So you can, I don't use it this way, but I think you can bring down GitHub issues into PHP Storm and see the issues. So you might be able to see things you're supposed to work on.
Do you at least use like to-do comments to at least make a list
the code?
Of things? Yeah, within the code.
Sometimes. But I will pull when I have to do review of other people's code and pull down a PR. Sometimes I find it super useful because PHP Storm connects to GitHub, and I can just say, hey, find the ones that are assigned to me, shows me all the PRs,
Oh, okay.
and click a
Yeah,
button,
that'd be good.
open the PR. It'll load it in PHP Storm's diff, which I find so much easier to use than GitHub's web diff. No offense to GitHub's web diff. It's just a web diff, as opposed to me being able to open up discrete files, see the diff, and not scroll up and down all throughout the page when it's a larger PR. But the big thing that I really like is I can hit a button and just check out the branch using Git. And then from the IDE, I can be looking at the diff and I can say, oh, actually move to that source. I want to see the source code because I want to change something, I want to play with something. So that is that part of that workflow, because a lot of what we do is, take a PR, make sure it works. That's a thing that's on my to-do list. I have a set of PRs I have to review. But no, for a lot of the work that we do, other project management tools manage that day to day. But there are times when I just grab a piece of paper and write down the things that I know need to get done today for a particular project.
See, I was just curious because I remember when I was using Visual Studio, I did like the feature that you have. I don't know if it was built in by default or turned on by default, or a plugin there where you make comments within your code, or just have like a way to collate or combine all of those tasks that you're kind of making either within the comments or just with notes, and then have like a sort of task manager kind of built into the IDE. That was kind of useful. And that's what I've with Doom Emacs with the org mode, which is basically just a task manager. It's task manager, but then you could do some kind of fancy things with it with scheduling. And then it's nice. You can kind of have it side by side or have it like a window or panel kind of around your code, so you can kind of have a list of things that you need to work on. So that was one of the things that I was kind of attracted to, because kind of having my task list kind of near where I'm actually working. I have tried the paper and pencil approach before, but I was I don't know. I always go back to, the reason why that I always go back to digital approach. I like having it in multiple devices. So between my laptop to my desktop, I wish I could have on my phone. That's the one thing I would like to have. Like if I'm using this org mode on Emacs, it is a GitHub repository that I can, push a commit to, so I can sync it between different devices. But I don't have a way to do that for my phone. So it'd be kind of nice if I could bring up this list or this kind of task manager or
run Emacs on your phone, right?
I know. I don't know. I could have got to figure that out with like having like to pull this Git repo and clone it to my phone so I could open it up in some type of application. Maybe that could be an app idea. I don't know.
I'm wondering, is there a web-based Emacs?
I have no idea if I'm gonna. I have no idea if I'm gonna do that. But I don't know. That was it's something I've been playing with. But interesting working with Linux now, back using my PC as a host, and I'm just starting it with work with Emacs. But I don't know. It's nice. I've been pretty impressed with getting back into Linux, because I remember back in the day, and we talked about this, like the early distros that I used, and kind of one of the reasons why I went away from it, like just the design, the type, like the typefaces never felt as like clean and as sharp, and just the UI just didn't feel like really comfortable to use. That's why going to the Mac or then even Windows just feels a lot more pleasant on the eyes. But Linux has gone really, really good, and I have to admit, from just the typefaces that it uses to the way it's rendering, just the screen, the windows, the speed, how clean it is, and I think it's interesting how I've been away for so long from a desktop perspective, that now getting back into it, I don't know if Linux could just get on par with Windows when it comes to gaming. Because like doing gaming and also game development, that's one thing I don't know if I could get away from Windows permanently, but like it would be kind of interesting. Like maybe next year over the summer, I could really have more time to play with this, and if I really want to kind of dedicate my desktop to just running Linux. But then there's still the issue of being able to run certain games, which I know Steam has
Steam's making strides.
They're really pushing their side of that with we talked about the Steam Deck, right?
Steam Deck is the handheld version.
It's the handheld that's coming out.
It runs SteamOS, I'm guessing.
SteamOS, which runs
Linux.
like what's called like a Proton layer on top of Linux, that basically gives you like a bridge for games that are designed for Windows to then work on Linux, sort of like Wine, right? We talked about that, like trying to get
just
Wine
like better. My understanding is better, or maybe it's just that it's more focused towards what games need.
So the one issue that I have, especially if I want to be around competitive gaming, and a lot of these games now that do online gaming have their own kind of, not really bootloaders, but their own kind of sub programs need to run or get booted into the operating system to prevent cheating and hacking
Oh,
of the
okay.
game.
Okay.
So that's one issue of like, the primary game I play is Valorant, which has with Riot's own kind of, what do they call this? Riot Vanguard. So it's their own kind of program that you to install on Windows, and it has to load right when Windows loads. If it's not loaded, the game won't run, and you won't be able to play online. So that's those types of applications.
Like observing your operating system from boot to make sure you're not doing anything funky with it. To
initially, knowing that Riot is owned by Tencent, that kind of worried me. Tencent's a Chinese company, and and I was kind of worried about having a program.
Is that?
Yeah, I know.
Really, is there anything to be concerned about there? I don't know.
And so it took me a little bit like last year, a couple years ago when I was starting to get into this, and I was like, oh, I got to install this, and I was like, it's running basically a piece of Chinese software. Not really. I did some research about it, and I know that was an issue when Riot first introduced this application or this anti-cheat software. People are up in arms about saying, you can't. I'm not going to want this program running on my computer all the time. We don't know what it's doing, what it's reporting back to, and especially since you're owned now by a Chinese company. And so they kind of tried to tone that down and said, like, we're not, we don't have any like reporting back to.
The Riot was like, no, it's okay. And then everybody said,
motherland, we don't do that.
Okay.
We keep everything in California or what? I don't know. So I just kind of forgot about it, but.
I was really concerned, but then it was like I should play the game. So I
know. I gave up on that. But thinking about that, those like little things like that, though, I think that's what's keeping gaming to really taking a big leap. Because when software developers, game developers, big game studios want to then have their own kind of custom software that's relying on Windows in a sense, and then having a compatibility layer, like what Steam's doing, that also. But I don't know, who do you see the news about Microsoft buying Blizzard? No, not Blizzard. Activision.
I saw the news. I'm not sure I understand it, but
Activision, who they were kind of buying up everybody because they bought up Blizzard, they bought up a bunch of other big studios.
Right, I saw it as Microsoft bought Blizzard, but
yeah, so
those are the headlines that I was seeing. Well,
Activision's been having a rough year with I guess a lot of legal issues with the men have not been acting appropriately within the company towards women.
Okay.
So, and that's been coming out, and they've been dealing with that, and the stock price has just been falling over the year because the executives haven't really been dealing with it, and the CEO.
But Microsoft paid a decent amount for it, though, didn't it?
It's actually the largest transaction or the largest proposed merger of I think of any company. So, and that's why people are talking, I've been seeing online, but people are talking like, is that going to go through? Are they going to kind of step in and do something like not antitrust, but like kind of
no, that's what it would be, right? Antitrust.
So they're talking about just because the price of how this is going to be the largest merger ever, and it is going to pretty much merge. Microsoft's going to kind of fold into their gaming division into Activision in it. So it's going to pretty much really, compared to if you take like Microsoft to Sony and Nintendo, Sony's, I'd essentially seen Sony's share price tanked like, I don't know, just what, like not too much, but like it did fall immediately after that.
It dropped after the announcement?
Because they're thinking about like, are they going to take these games that Activision makes, like Call of Duty or World of Warcraft? Are they going to take it and then not allow them to run on the PlayStation? So they're people are concerned about that, which
my gut says no.
But I think some will, like games like World of Warcraft, that's not going to be an issue. But like games that are like competitive or multiplayer games, I don't expect like Call of Duty Warzone. That'll probably always run, between a because that's the way that game works, is running on a multi-platform way. But interesting, like new versions of like single player games. If there's going to be like a new Call of Duty or new kind of single player game that they make, or like a new, like say Tony Hawk. Remember Tony Hawk? Activision used to make those.
I do. You know who looks a lot like Tony Hawk?
Who?
Tony Hawk.
Is that like a joke there?
That's a thing. You've not seen that? Like, he gets recognized as Tony Hawk all the time, but people are like, dude,
he's Tony Hawk.
Know who you look like? You look like Tony Hawk.
Oh, yeah. Well, he's Tony Hawk. That's why.
His whole Twitter is like full of stories where people are like, man, you look like that skateboard dude.
Yeah.
And he's like, that's me. I think there was one story of him like getting on a plane and the lady looks Tony Hawk. He's like, that's weird. You're named the same as a skateboard dude. And he's like probably with the skateboard.
Yeah.
What a surprise.
like a game like Tony Hawk that's more of, it could, might have some type of multiplayer kind of component built into it, but it's primarily a single player game, or traditionally known as a single player game.
So they're thinking that
those types
now
of games
Microsoft is just going to release that for Xbox.
Yeah. Yeah, or PC, Xbox and PC, and then that's the only way we're gonna be able to play those types of games. So
No, that's
we'll see.
interesting. That's
It is
interesting.
kind of.
I mean, it makes sense for Microsoft to buy it because, I mean, I don't know how Microsoft is divided up into divisions, but their gaming division
They have so much. They have so much money. Like that was the $75 billion that they're proposing to buy this for is only 2% of their cash.
of Microsoft's cash.
Yes.
Or
So it's like
so we're not talking
nothing.
about like the game division. But like I don't even
No,
know how
like
big
overall the whole
Xbox
organization
is
is.
in
Yeah,
Microsoft, but I think
I
it's
don't.
pretty big.
I don't know either, but I did hear that like a financial analyst was talking about the transaction, saying from Microsoft's perspective, from buying this, it's not going to hurt them at all. Like even if Activision fails, in a sense, like the money they're going to pay, they could make back in another way. It's not really that big of a deal because they have so much money that they can just throw it around. So you're right. Like why not buy them? Because or why not buy other companies like this?
Right.
Because they have the money and the resources to do that. So, but thinking about going back to Linux, though, it'd be interesting because Microsoft has become more Linux friendly.
Sure have.
So I wonder if they are going to do something similar because they want their Xbox Game Pass or their Xbox kind of or for Xbox PC, they have their own kind of launcher or player or app that allows you to buy and download games. And if you have Game Pass, that's sort of like the Netflix.
So you can play Xbox games on Windows? Is that what
that are PC compatible, yes, but it's
Okay.
like one.
Okay.
It's like
That are
one
PC
subscription.
compatible. Okay.
If you pay for the Xbox Pass Ultimate, it's one subscription, and you could basically have a library of games that you could download for Xbox, and then also on the PC. And so it's a nice plan. So you pay $50 a month, you get this whole library of games. You don't have to pay like $60 or $70 for a game anymore. So it's actually a really, really interesting program they have. So they're talking about Microsoft's goal from the gaming division. They want to put that Game Pass. They want to get everybody subscribed to Game Pass, just like Netflix wants everybody to be subscribed to Netflix, and just have this ongoing kind of revenue stream from that, and then get that to be like the gateway, the door to get more customers into the Microsoft ecosystem. So I'm wondering, would they put Game Pass on Linux? And then work with either the Proton layer that Steam's using. I don't know, because Steam and Microsoft never really work together really, really well.
No?
But it would be interesting to kind of see what they do, because I know that Microsoft's become more Linux friendly. So I don't know. That would be interesting.
That's interesting because now, do you know from a game development standpoint, how much effort is required to take something that is built for Xbox and make it also run on PC? Because my gut has to say, whatever operating system is running on an Xbox, I gotta feel it's a lot similar to Windows.
Well, it's basically
a core.
It's a library. It's like primarily the graphics library is the biggest issue, like OpenGL versus DirectX. So if games are written for DirectX, then they are going to need some type of translation layer that run, because the DirectX isn't available on Linux. OpenGL is.
No, but I'm not talking about even Linux. I'm talking about the level of effort to go from an Xbox game to a Windows game.
Oh, that I never did any development for Xbox. You mean the console?
Yeah, I'm just taking a stab to say I feel like there's probably not a whole lot of.
I think from what I've never did it, from what I've read, it's actually if you develop for Xbox, going into the PC is not that big of a deal, because you're still right, because the Xbox still uses a version of DirectX. So you're writing to that, and then you're compiling if you're using a game engine like Unreal or Unity, and they're compiling the game and packaging it for the platform. You're still using DirectX, which is the same graphics library that Windows uses. And it's just a matter of optimizing it for the rest of the hardware, for like the CPU, the memory, the variations of memory size, which on the console, all that's fixed. So as a developer,
have fixed specs, so you know
what you're gonna get when you go to the PC. Just like from my experience, building mobile apps, which is crazy. Think about all the different device sizes.
Oh, right.
All the from screen sizes to
different resolutions,
different speed of devices. That's a pain in the butt for mobile developers. So game developers who develop for the PC have the same issue. Right.
Yeah. But yeah, that'd be interesting
So if Linux could get better with the gaming side, I feel like I say, when Linux has got so good, I would go Linux full time. If I could have an issue with running any games, or even from a game development perspective, as long as I can run the Unreal Engine or a good game engine on that, then I'd be happy.
I mean, the reason I'm still running Windows is for applications, not games, but like Fusion 360, some more creative applications that I don't have a good feel of what I can run on Linux, or they don't perform the same way, or just not familiar with them because I've used the Windows version of that type of software for all of my life. So But yeah,
especially for the speed too. Like like I said, I was amazed how fast it worked on this comparatively low powered laptop compared to my desktop PC. And it feels really snappy and fast. And when I'm doing different functions, it works really, really well. So that would be the other reason going from Windows to Linux, because Windows has gotten, even though I like Windows 10, I don't have too many issues with it. I'm definitely not jumping into Windows 11 because all the horror stories I've read about how, that's one of those odd versions of Windows you may want to avoid. Wait till Windows 12 because it feels like, I don't know.
So you never go with the odd versions, huh?
No, I don't know. But I
avoided 3, but you went with 4. Is that what I'm understanding?
Well, yeah, I went 3. I
started with avoided 3. 5, but went with 6.
First one was 3 for me.
3.1, right?
3.1, then the 95, and then
95, which is an odd one. So 98 is the even one.
98 was. That was the start of like, okay, Microsoft's starting to release some weird, the ME version, the Millennium version, the Me version, right?
That was not great.
And during the time, a lot of people just run Windows 2000 because that was pretty reliable. That was based off the NT kernel, so that was pretty reliable.
I remember reading someplace somebody saying if Microsoft had open sourced the NT kernel, they felt that Linux would have never happened. Like they were that's confident about the kernel that they would have, if they would have open sourced the NT kernel, there wouldn't have been a need for Linux. Was some engineers' perspective.
That would be world changing. You're right. That would be a nice divergent in the way the world was evolving from a tech perspective. Yeah, you're right. That would actually have been
I mean, you can't discount the impact of licensing and open versus open source as to why one operating system tends to be used on most of the world's servers, and another
Thinking
doesn't.
About the NT and the NT kernel, which is really interesting, because I was watching an Xbox documentary that Microsoft put out themselves. It was like I think it's 5-part, 6-part documentary that they put out. They released it on YouTube. Just go on YouTube and watch it. Or if you're on your Xbox, you can bring it up in their marketplace. But it was actually pretty interesting because it was an honest kind of documentary about the journey of how the Xbox has been developed, how it evolved over time, starting with the first big Xbox to what we have now, and kind of the trials, tribulations, the red rings of death that the Xbox had to go through. Remember those?
No. I mean, I remember hearing about them, but I was never a console gamer.
But thinking about the NT kernel, which is really, this is a fact I did not know, but watching, they were honest about this. The first Xbox was based off of the NT kernel. Because they need to have a base operating system, and then Bill Gates was like, "Oh, we got to run Windows on it, right? We got to put Windows. That's what we want to do. So we want to say Windows is running the Xbox, it's powering that." And the developers that were saying, "No, we don't want. we want the OS to take us a minimal amount of resources as possible, and so we can use the resources for actually playing the games." And but they're saying, okay, what we have that could run fit that bill is just the NT kernel. So they started talking to the NT guys about that, and the political nature of Microsoft. They were like, they got a lot of pushback.
Wait, are you saying there's politics at play internal to Microsoft?
I was shocked too.
This is a surprise. Yeah, this is a surprise to me. What?
So they were talking back for trying to get the NT guys involved. They would not budge because what they were doing is say, okay, if you use the NT kernel and put that on the Xbox, it needs to include this, it needs to include that, it needs to include that. They were really mandating how the NT kernel was going to be used. So what they did, you'll love this, or I loved it. They stole it. They went to the server.
They pirated.
They did. It was amazing. They went into the Microsoft kind of server area where the NT kernel source was,
and they just took it.
They went to it in the middle of the night. They put a USB drive in there, and then they got the kernel out, and they just stole it. And they didn't tell anybody they were using it until they already had it running on the box.
That's amazing.
I know.
I love. I mean, that's the can-do spirit for you.
I know, because
there's all. You know what that is? That's all those entrepreneur types that these big companies say they want internally because they're going to revitalize the organization. That's what they do. Just FYI, that's what happens when you hire those people.
Yeah, because they were talking about that when they were first developing the Xbox. It was just a small team, like 3 or 5 guys. Who were just trying to get the thing off, just to do a prototype, so they could actually start to develop it.
Take the source code on a USB and make it work on your hardware. That's great. No, that is great.
And then what they did, they took the source, and they talked about how they went through every line of the source code and they trimmed it down as much as possible to the bare essentials that they needed to run on the hardware that they were expecting for the Xbox to have. And they just reworked it. So it's pretty interesting. So NT in a sense,
we don't need that.
Calculator.
Yeah.
Oh,
you don't
the
need that.
program.
Rip it out. Rip
Yeah.
it out.
Yeah.
Notepad, nobody's gonna need that. A window manager, probably not.
Yeah, so yeah, Microsoft's kind of interesting. So I don't know. It's like it'll be kind of interesting to see what Microsoft does from a game perspective with Linux. I hope that it'd be kind of great if they start releasing their Xbox Game Pass on Linux and start to open that up a little more. That could actually be an interesting future for gaming on Linux.
If like you say, Proton's the path forward, that compatibility layer, and if Microsoft decides that it's important, then that compatibility layer probably will become a lot more maintained, which could be interesting. I feel like it's a bit of a long shot, but
yeah,
I also feel like if they did that, others would benefit because I could probably then start running more Windows software. You know, like the few applications that I want to run, I'd probably start running on my on Linux anyway, and then who knows? Maybe I'd see how Linux runs on a Surface Studio laptop, because that could be interesting.
So one thing that I was kind of interested about hearing from the PHP Ugly guys for their show last night.
Really?
Or no, it was actually John. It was a tweet from John, because I was listening to the show, and then I think he did a tweet like later after the show or something. I don't know.
We got to get other podcasts to talk about us.
Well, what we did,
It's
while I was
not
thinking
us
to him and
talking
watching
about
this,
other
if you
podcasts.
want to expand the audience, well, we got to get on other podcasts too. So we got to do some guest appearances. That's where you get a following. So
Is that how it works?
But they brought up he brought up something about the fact what PHP 8.1.2 was released.
Yes.
I think we
yesterday.
talked about this too, about the versions of PHP that I've used for a while. So
You've not used PHP for quite some time.
Yeah, I went from like 5. We talked this. I went from 5 to 7, and 6 didn't exist, right? Is that what we
Did
talked
you go
about?
from 5 to 7 though?
I think I did.
PHP 7.
I did, but I didn't really.
Yeah, 6 did not exist. 6.
So I'm curious.
No matter what books you can get on Amazon.
Going from, let's say, 7 to 8 from a feature perspective, because I'm always thinking about that. I'm thinking about, okay, if I was going to be doing.
Always thinking about it?
I'm always thinking about this stuff. I'm a developer, right? This is what I do. So I think about, if I wanted to, because I am thinking about building out some APIs and starting to do some server-side programming again for some things. So I'm like thinking like, well, I would always fall back to Python. That's what you use. So if I was going to use is PHP 8, or what features does it have that kind of going from like 7 to 8 that really makes it stand out, or that would really entice developers to use it?
This is a great question, because now if I don't answer it right, everybody's going to look at me and say, he's a PHP developer. He doesn't even know what's coming in 8.
I know. I told you, like we do. We don't do any show prep together, so you have no idea.
So thanks for the heads up on this. Is this like a technical interview? Am I expected to know some things here? Is that what's going on? Lots of fun stuff. There's a lot of things that were deprecated in PHP 7 that are now errors in PHP. And I will just pause for a moment and say that the word is deprecated. It's not depreciated. That's a different word. You don't depreciate code. You deprecate it. So we'll just move on with that. But there's things that were marked as deprecated. So they're doing warnings in PHP 7 that are now full-on errors in PHP 8. So that is a change that could block some migration.
So it's a big update, for
there. Well, I don't know if I'd
some things you're saying.
Say big update. There's just if there's some things that if you're doing, it's going to take some effort to get your code ready for PHP 8. But the big things that there's a couple different things that in PHP 8 brings along that I'm interested in. One is union types.
What's that?
So union types is
I'm not from my language, but describe it.
Right, but instead of saying you have to have a single type. For either for an argument or for a return, because PHP 7 introduced return types, introduced scalar type hints, introduced, and when I say 7, I'm talking about the whole, the whole set of 7. Different minor versions introduced different things. But in PHP 7, we get scalar type hints, we get arguments type hinting. We may have had that before, but we got return type hints, so we can say, hey, this method, and we even got some type. Can't remember the word. Well, I can't remember the words. It's not coalescing, or maybe it is. But like the idea that you can say a return value needs to be of this type, and you can return a more specific type, right? Something that implements that, and you can do the same thing with variable arguments. You can say, well, it needs to at least be this. But when I say when you can in a class that extends your other class, you can change the type return, or you can change the type declaration as long as it at least satisfies its parent's interface, which was that was something that PHP 7 gave us a lot of flexibility and new stuff on types. But union types are where you can say, hey, this argument is going to be one of this or this.
Oh, really? Okay.
And this return type is going to be one of this or this or this or this or this. You can do as many.
You're just giving a list of types that.
Right, which is really useful for us because, as I say us, like developers, because there are plenty of times where I just need to. Well, I've run into situations where I've basically had to say, well, there's these two different types. They're very, very related, but they don't inherit from anything common. But they're very, very related, and you're going to get one of those two back. So I end up creating an interface that is empty, and I have both of them implemented. So I can say, hey, it's an assignable thing, because assignable thing could be like, it could be a member, it could be a system, it could be, there's a bunch of different things that are assignable. They don't share anything else. Because it doesn't require a method on it. It's the class that's going to get the assignable thing that will inspect the type and be like, okay, I know how to relate it. So there's not even a common interface where they all have to be like get assignment ID. Because if there was, that would be the interface you'd give them all. But there's none of that. It's just like it really expects it to be one of these three different things that are completely unrelated, except for the fact that this wants one of those things. So create an empty interface and say they're all part of that, so you can at least type in and from an IDE standpoint, you can say, hey, what implements that? Oh, it's these three things. I understand that. And from static analysis, you can look at your code and be like, well, it's wrong. It's going to fail because it's not. You didn't pass it the right thing. So we've done stuff like that, which would be a lot easier just to do in union types, especially for return types. So that's what I'm very much.
So it sounds like it's just built in more features to kind of tighten up or to kind of like, what's the word?
To do better typing. To do better
just
typing.
to give like better tools for developers to harden up their code in a sense, right?
Yeah, you could say it that way. Yeah, typing makes development less prone to silly errors.
It's interesting. Moving from JavaScript to TypeScript, I kind of felt that too about how
that's what TypeScript is.
Yeah,
right?
I know. Well, like JavaScript being it's loosey goosey, dynamic variables, and kind of how it'll just kind of handle behind the scenes and say a prayer every time you hopefully your JavaScript code doesn't break. But TypeScript is, even though it takes more work, and I think it's interesting how, especially with new developers, they get into JavaScript, and JavaScript's a great introductory language to teach. To teach new developers and how like the basis of coding, and then once you show them the TypeScript or kind of enforcing types within JavaScript using TypeScript, and like you're talking about writing interfaces for that, it does take more work and a little bit more thought, and you have to think through it a little bit more. But yeah, the benefits of that after you get the code written and then you build on top of it, it's definitely beneficial.
Right, because know an object behaves the way it behaves because it has a type and it has a declaration of what's going to happen. Now, the Python developer in you, which if I recall correctly, that's the one language you would go back to.
If I'm going to go back to doing writing a server side program, I would probably prefer Python more than anything. That's what I was curious about. Talking to you, and then also kind of seeing some things that John tweets about PHP, and kind of thinking about, what would really entice me to go back to PHP? And thinking about also what is PHP used for nowadays? Because back when I was doing server side web applications where
everything.
I guess you could say that, but is PHP best used for APIs right now, or is it?
Oh no, I mean it's for any web stuff. PHP is probably a reasonable choice. It kind of depends on what else you're going to do with it.
Because if I'm going to be rewriting a modern web app, I would want the separation concerns of separating the server side and the front end and the back end, and primarily just doing like a JavaScript, front end
for sure,
accessing, an API. But then thinking about what platform I would build that API in, that's something that, I would always go back to Python because that feels good. But PHP, like I said, when I was using PHP in the past, I would, I don't know, it's kind of, it's templating, like with integration with HTML, kind of get a little tired of that because I actually like the separation between of having, your data, running like for loops.
I don't know that there's a lot of
loops and you're querying your database, directly within your web page, which that's
a bad thing.
I know, but a lot of PHP developers, when they first learn, that's what that's the way it's taught to, which I don't like.
No, that's not a good
early computer classes.
If you're teaching PHP by putting SQL calls directly in an HTML page and escaping out into PHP. You're teaching it wrong.
I know.
Like, that is.
I know.
You can do it. You shouldn't do it. Don't teach people that way. Come on, we're better than this.
It's interesting. It's the easiest way to teach a concept because you get it's the least amount of code to get a result, and I think that's why teachers do it. But then it builds in bad patterns
so much.
Students first learn that, and then they're like, I realized I don't teach server side programming at the college, but I know how they teach the class because I had those students and seeing how they look at the textbook and talk to them about what the exercise and what they're working on.
Audit these classes? Is this what needs to happen?
So I know that's the
all right,
where they start off.
Call me up.
And
just tim@timlytle.net. Shoot me an email. I will totally miss it.
Yeah.
But yes, I will.
They do move past it eventually.
A reasonable fee, tell you all that you're doing wrong about server-side development and teaching it.
So, yeah. Well, that's the reason why I kind of pulled away from teaching. I don't know. Did we talk about this, about me pulling away from teaching the web development, kind of within the computer science department?
No.
Because I was splitting my time between.
I actually had a thing to talk about Python, but we've completely gone by that.
Oh, well,
I'm still answering your PHP 8 question.
I know. We may come back to that
because Python has named arguments.
Yeah.
PHP 8 introduces named arguments.
Okay.
So I mean, don't have method overloading like you do in compiled languages, but that idea of being able to say, oh, I've got a ton of arguments. And this one is usually optional, but
so you cannot.
But if I want to set this last one, I have to be like, know the default values and no. So you can just now reference the variable name when calling the method.
So you can't do, because I know you can do that in Python. You can't do overloading within your class methods.
I mean,
find multiple class methods with the same name, then
different signatures.
Yeah.
No. I would like that. A lot of times the value for that, at least. I'm not seeing the value for it because I don't work primarily in a language that allows that a lot. But it seems to me a lot of times the value for that is in constructing objects. And for that, a lot of times, the pattern that I will use is I'll make the constructor of a class private, and I'll make static public functions that are named constructors, where they wrangle. Okay, you gave me these 3 variables. I know how to wrangle that into whatever the constructor wants, or that you give me these 5 variables. But honestly, some of that, like if some of them are optional, some of them weren't, and the issue is just that it's weird to provide the optional arguments that you're not providing because you have to get to the one optional argument that you are providing at the end. I mean, some of my name constructor usage, there's other reasons why to do it. So someone can't actually call the constructor again and change state if you're doing an immutable kind of value object thing. But the named arguments may help with some of that. Because you can just say, oh, I know, they're all technically optional. I'm going to provide you these 3, and you're gonna throw an exception if I didn't provide you enough data. So yeah, I mean, I still think the name constructor, the static name constructor, probably presents better communicating to code that's going to be calling you. But the named arguments I'm definitely interested to see them because they should make. Specifically, long PHP methods that have a lot of default values, and you just want to change the last one. You'll be able to call them that way too. And then one thing I don't know too much about, and that's coming from PHP. Well, here's another one. We talked about constructors. PHP 8 is introducing something they call constructor property promotion. So you can just say the arguments that I pass my constructor. Are going to become properties on my class. Okay. So
automatically.
Right. I just kind of defined in the constructor variables. It's like, hey, you need to pass me this variable. It happens to be of type thing. And hey, it should be a private property of myself. And you don't have to do the tedious work of saying, this thing equals thing, because that I was passed to my constructor. So that's, that's nice. That's
nice. That is nice. Yeah.
So, but there's a lot of new things coming in PHP 8 that are exciting to use for sure.
All right, you have to keep me and the rest of our audience updated on that.
Yeah, there's about as much interest as there is in Emacs, I think. Everybody's like, yeah, can we hear Tim drone on more about PHP features? I would like to hear that.
You know, one thing also I was going to ask you about documentation.
Do it. You should definitely do it.
I know and with open source developers or just software developers in general, I know writing documentation is a pain. It takes a lot of time. Usually there's dedicated people, or just people who, put a lot of effort into it. But but as a new user, because there's actually, going back to Doom Emacs, there's a nice Emacs module called Magic, which is their Git kind of, it's a Git module that inside of Emacs that provides a lot of Git functionality. Within the interface. And I saw, once again, I love my YouTube demos of watching people use this, and it looks like magic. And when they use it, but to get at that level, as somebody learning that, and you went, okay, I'm going to look at the documentation and try to figure out, but like, oh my gosh, the magic documentation, even though it looks like it has a ton of information, it's so hard to parse and so hard to figure out
what you actually want to see.
And I'm like, I was doing that last night because I was thinking, okay, yeah, this Git repo, I'm working in my Doom Emacs. I want to do a commit instead of opening up a terminal and doing it by the command line. I want to use this magic to do it. And I was trying to figure it out and the right way to do it and the right key bindings to use and the right functions to get this working when I could easily just did it a couple of lines on the terminal. But I was winning the documentation because I wanted to learn it, and it was so hard to parse. So do you find that like go and try to learn something like a new library or something like that, and then go through documentation and trying to have an issue with trying to learn something new with open source documentation? Because I know it's a challenge with writing documentation. I feel for the developers of applications or libraries and that other people are going to use. But it feels like as a developer, you have to really, it's almost like a trial by fire. You have to like kind of really put a lot of time into just parsing the documentation in order to get it to a level you can feel competent to use it to actually use the libraries or the functions where you're trying to do.
I'm honestly trying to think of the last time I had to introduce, like from a library standpoint, something that I wasn't kind of already familiar with. I will say, some people may disagree with me on this. In the PHP world, I find the Laminos, which is the former Zen framework, I find the Laminos documentation pretty easy to follow. So I know I've had to, I'd say recently, like in the past year or so, had to look up different components that we're using from Laminos and figure out, that's why that's working that direction. That's why that's working that way.
Because like some of the best documentation I've been experienced with is interesting from like game engines. Like I was talking about, I've used Unity, now using Unreal, also Godot. I talked about that. Godot is really, as an open source project, they have probably the best documentation I've ever used. Like a lot of, it's really easy. It has a good search. It has a really good way to, outline view so you can see it. And then it has good like illustrations of showing, screenshots of the application and document. So as a new user to learn it, it's really, really good. So I find from game engine's perspective, their documentation has been pretty good.
And the search is huge, right?
Yeah.
And there's two different things too, right? Like there's from a how do I use this? How am I supposed to use this? I need to just understand the concepts that this library or code is introducing, so I understand how to relate things and put them together. But then there's also how does this method actually work? And for that stuff, I tend not even to care about the documentation because, PHP is an interpreted language, right? If I have a library I've brought in, the code is sitting right there. I've brought it in through my dependency manager. So I will just control click, I'll follow to the declaration and I'll look at it. What's it doing? So I read a ton of library code too, just to be like, oh, what is it doing? Because documentation, the hardest part of documentation is the fact that it drifts.
What do you mean by that drifts?
Someone will forget to update it. And I'm talking about like my own documentation, like when I put README files in the code base that I'm working on, and forget then to update the README when I change the behavior. That's the hardest thing is documentation drift.
Yeah, because I love documentation. If I just need to look up, what that method is and what it does, kind of what arguments is expecting, that I don't mind that at all. But you brought up an interesting point of like just understand the process or the way to work with it, or like
right.
As
Am
a new
I supposed
user
to be
getting
using
started?
This thing? Yeah.
What is the recommended steps? If you want to do this, what should you do?
Right.
That kind of, that type piece of the documentation, I feel as a developer, maybe they miss or forget to put in.
Like, what do you mean by a hydrator? I don't know. What is it? What's it supposed? You're telling me I have to do this and this and this. What are these things even supposed to do? I need to know more about that.
Yeah.
So, and with that, somehow we only have a minute left, Mark.
Another show just flies by, Tim.
It does. It's not the 13th show, even though that might be what it says, but it's the 14th show. I still don't know whether
this is
we're
always the happiest time of
do we
my
have
week.
14 listeners? I don't.
Ending
I don't
it with
know.
you.
Is that that's part of your weekend? Your week is ending it.
You're the start of my weekend, Tim.
I'm the start of your weekend. This is
Yeah,
what
that's right.
This is what brings you in. All right. Well, I don't know what we can talk about next week because I feel like we just basically covered everything we could cover. So we'll have to.
But don't worry, we will never run out of topics because, like I said, we come with things we want to talk about, and we talk about something else. So.
Yes. So an endless
happens.
supply of us rambling incoherently about the stuff that we might find interesting this week. I will try to release it on Friday, and I will release this one next Friday. So if you're listening now, you should tune in live, 1 p.m. Eastern, and on either YouTube or the Twitters, and go to devfridayshow.com and find us there.
Sounds good.